Welcome to the Wisdom of Show. I'm your host, Simon Bowen, and every week I'm speaking to the world's greatest leaders, thinkers, and entrepreneurs about complex issues and impactful leadership. Join us in the Renaissance of Wisdom. Well, welcome to this episode of the Wisdom of, where we want to get away from the tips, tricks, and hacks and get into the deeper wisdom from people from all sorts of disciplines around the world that have deep wisdom to share. And my guest today is Michael Clark. He's a next economy strategist, a data as an asset pioneer, and he's author of a book called Our Moment, which is a modern fable about where the world is and where it's headed and what does it mean for us in the context of modern technology. And so we definitely want to be having a conversation about that. He's a former Mastercard leader who built the company's first open banking product. He's advised the C-suite executives worldwide on data, AI, and the future of money. He's filled just about every role in corporations, and he's able to pull together the pieces and the blocks of what is going on in a company to make sense of what is happening and also make sense of the future. He's known for joining those dots across industries, and he helps leaders move from theory to action, shapes systems of tomorrow rather than simply talking about them, and is working globally in doing this work. So, Michael, thanks so much for joining us, and I can't wait to have this conversation.
Yeah, likewise. I'm really looking forward to
it. So, Michael, I want to lead with our moment, right? And I had a look through through what the book is about. It's a modern fable. Interesting. You're telling us to reflect on who we are and who we're becoming as technology. Modern technology shapes our lives. It's a fable because of the style of what that can bring, but I'd love to unpack this our moment concept a little bit and help people understand where did that come from and what is it exactly for people to grasp that.
So I guess where it came from is the old Mastercard corporate life. I was asked to write a paper on the future of data until 2035. It was around the time of the metaverse. So it was more of a response to say, well, okay, if most of the world becomes digital, how will this affect data when our physical and our virtual worlds become one, almost blend? So I did the paper. As I was writing it, almost like felt like an economy jumping off the page, but it also, you could see cracks. And when I left, I carried on digging and looking at things. And there was a realization that there was so much noise around AI with a negative lens.
Yeah.
I always felt that actually this is a positive catalyst for change. And the title for our moment was intentional because it felt like we won't get this moment again. It almost feels like it's the first moment since the industrial age we were on the cusp of a entirely new economy, because we've never had one since. Yes, we've used words like the digital economy and knowledge economy, but they're not economies because the measurement system of the economy never changed. All we changed was how you and I exchange value, and the means of exchange became digital or it became knowledge. It's not an economy. Commerce, yes, economy. So, and if you think about our education system, that's never changed. It's now being challenged. So all of the things that AI is challenging, we shouldn't look at those negatively. It was almost like, this could be a moment where we redirect things if we intentionally do it the right way, where we could unlock human potential for the first time, but also set technology on a different path, which is a path to augment people rather than necessarily replace them. So our moment was a way, it was written as a fable because one, people believe in stories and they remember stories and they believe in the one. So I had to make this a hero's journey and a story with all the facts embedded, which is in essence the history of technology we've never heard, all the mistakes, all the opportunities we missed, and then how we ended up here, and then what the future could be if we make these changes to how we learn, live, and work.
So it's interesting, when you say we've never really had the industrial age created a new economy, but we haven't had a new economy since. Correct. Until maybe now. And, a lot of people would have said, well, when the internet came out, that created a new economy because all of a sudden, people could sell online and everything else. But the key is people were still exchanging value for money. It was still predicated around a commercial exchange at some sort of level. So when you say a new economy or a next economy, what defines a shift to a different economy in your thinking?
So right now there's a structural divergence which has happened since the internet age that was never addressed. So you have to almost go back 250 years. So the foundations of the economy were defined ultimately through, most people would recognize Adam Smith as the basis.
Yes.
Interestingly, through time, no one ever changed his model. They added on to it. So they added concept of wages, they added concepts of GDP until you end up where we are today, where even the concept of capitalism doesn't exist as it was. It's a hybrid. Capitalism in its true form isn't what we know today. So for an economy to emerge, few things have to be true. So if you think about what's changing today, the concept of labor has changed. The concept of capital has changed. The concept of measurements have changed. So these are all structural changes. So the world is carrying on, chugging along, but the cracks are emerging, right? Because if we think about capital and we think so ownership and all these other pieces around distribution, well, we can't measure intangible assets in the world because there's no accounting model for that. So that doesn't work. We don't have ownership over key assets. We have a centralized model. So you take all of these pieces of the puzzle and you go, well, actually, this is a new economy. For the first time ever, these are such structural gaps that we actually are now creating a new economy because we have no choice.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, the alternative is you carry on as you are, then you have to create emergency means like universal basic income and others, because we're too frightened to change the underlying foundations, or at the very least evolve them, not necessarily change them.
Yes, I often talk to business leaders about the limitations we have with an industrial age finance system, an industrial age accounting system, right? And, you and I have both heard countless CEOs say people are our greatest asset. And my question is, where do you show them in your finance system? You're showing them as a variable cost, actually. The first cost you can cut when you want to, get cash under control or something's happening, make some redundancy. They're not counted on the asset side. It's
Correct.
intangible. How do you count that? I don't have an answer for that.
That's the book. So the
Yeah,
book has
okay.
the answer for that. So
Well,
part of the work when I left Mastercard, and I can talk about this stuff freely now because the book
yeah,
is out. But part of it was realizing that the problem with data, for instance, and people was never a regulatory problem. It was an accounting problem
yeah.
because
Interesting.
data doesn't exist on the balance sheet, and people, as you rightly say, are actually liabilities and a cost.
Yeah,
And that then became, then you look at education and you go, okay, so we need to make the shift to abilities-based learning, which makes people adaptable. In the workplace, then I can actually value human ability. And then all I have to do then is shift it onto the balance sheet. So I had to redesign the balance sheet. So there was a lot of work that was done before our moment, which is why it took so long, because I actually had to solve all of these problems. I had to create the new educational system for AI. I had to create the future of work model. I had to create the new, because I work for JP Morgan and I understood economics, I had to define the entire accounting system and valuation frameworks for data and people and machines and
yeah,
the way that we would exchange all of this securely. Then you can go back to our moment and go, right, how do I stitch this together now that the average human being would understand? But you're absolutely
yeah.
right. There are a few people actually to spot that, because leaders stand up and they say, people are our greatest asset, but that's cool. But when you have a downturn, all roads lead you to the finance department. And in most cases, you can't even value people unless they're a consultant, because then at
Yeah.
least you can measure billable hours. You have no idea what knowledge and skill set just left the building because you're actually just looking at them as a cost base.
Well, and we valued them on their hourly rate, salary wise.
Correct.
We valued them at their total salary plus on costs and said that's what they're worth. And we've got all these metrics, on costs are going to be 30% on top of actual salary with, long service leave and everything else. But we haven't valued them on contribution. And how do you measure the value on that? And you're right that, a new economy is a challenge to fundamental and foundational paradigms,
Correct.
because one of the key things about business particularly, but actually the world, is you have to be able to count. Math is a universal language. It actually is the substrate of music. it's underneath almost every, you've got to be able to count, right? But how do you count people as an asset? And we have
Correct.
not answered that, right? And then
Which is the thing I had to figure out. Like I had to figure out how to value people, value machines, and also value data itself. Because if you can do those three things, you are basically some of the core pillars of an economy.
yeah,
Because look, if you break it down, like historically, what we're describing has never been a problem,
yeah,
right? Because people are in the old industrial model, people were key to production and knowledge was acquired by people, but then it was systematically distributed through the organization. In the context of the world we're moving into, the irony is AI needs the abilities and the knowledge of those people to interpret the outputs of the machine. Because really, these outputs of the machine are not outputs, they're inputs, input into the human to be able
mm,
to interpret, to turn into action. Well, if you've just fired everybody because of your cost base, you now don't even have the abilities required to improve the output, the inputs that AI is going to generate, and the right people in the organization to interpret them.
yeah,
So that's why AI is such a catalyst moment, because it will force us to change our concept of value. It will force us to change what we value and how we measure things. And that's just the start. There are a whole gambit of things when we think about ownership, production, the concept of capital. All of these things will fundamentally change in a positive way if we look at it that way. Otherwise, it's basically like brute forcing 24th century technology into a 21st, 22nd century model, which is never going to work in the years ahead because the cracks will continue.
and so much of the AI world, quite frankly, I mean, I spend a lot of my time in the entrepreneurial space,
Mhm.
particularly in North America, and so much of the AI world is actually at the tips, tricks, and hacks level. What's the latest app that can help you make a video in a different language? You know, what's the latest bit of agentic AI that can get a bunch of tasks done for you and save you time? Which is not the real shift that's occurring in terms of modern technology. You know,
Yeah.
we spend most of our time trying to codify the core genius of a company. You know, three things really drive success in a company. What are the mechanics of your company? How do you organize yourself so that you're completely consistent? Because then the market says we can rely on you.
Mm.
That's nice. We can rely on you. What's the character of the company? What's the magic of the company? Which means the people. And culture just leads to character. And if you're a company of character, I can trust you. Now, your mechanics mean I can rely on you. The magic of the people means I can trust you. The gap in the middle was, what's the model of thinking? That means you have a unique capability. In other words, what's your company genius that allows me to believe what you say you can do? Because this model of thinking sits behind everything you do. And what we notice is that model of thinking, that company genius, almost always has its origin with the founder. Think
Mm.
about Apple, Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. The origin of thinking can be traced all the way back.
Mm.
As those people step out, that origin of thinking starts to dilute. And yet, company after company that we work with has not codified the real value of that original genius in a way that makes it a genuine asset, if you like. It's because how do they count that? That's the problem. How do you count it? Data is interesting. You know, you're a data as an asset pioneer. And I think people listening to this might say, well, we've always known data is an asset, but I'm not sure if that is true. How's that shifting? You know,
So,
in a redefinition of economy, how's data as an asset shifting?
this is the funny thing here, right? So years gone by, people used to tell me data has no value, right?
Huh.
Um, then you ask them, well, okay, cool. So why are people prepared to go to court for it? Why do companies build moats around it? And
Yeah,
why
yeah.
do people desperately want to own something? It's not that it's not valued, it's just mispriced, or it's just
Right.
not priced from a market's point of view, right? So the irony is, it's our greatest asset, um, other than water and electricity, but we just haven't chosen to value it yet. Um, the value economically when you create an asset around this, because by the way it gets on the balance sheet is actually defining it as and classifying it as an asset. So
Mm,
if you can price it intrinsically and extrinsically, and you can, as a consequence, value it, it means I can also now derive a price. If I can derive a price, it means it can exist on a balance sheet. So as an asset, it just serves a number of purposes. One is it's an asset to a nation because data is also a representation of culture, whether we like it or not. It's a representation of who we were, who we are, and possibly who we become. But yet we recycle it constantly. Like we've deleted so much since the early 2000s, it's the equivalent of setting fire to the New York Library from the research. We found out in some of the research I did with others in the book that we didn't put it in the book, but at one point in 2018, data was more valuable than gold on the stock market if you value it. So, but on the flip side, data as an asset also means it now falls under more stricter regulation because now data would be seen as an essential service. So anybody that touches it would be deemed highly regulated and couldn't leave a market if they decided to. And the other piece of the puzzle then is remuneration of the asset and fair distribution of the asset and various protections and privacy that exist. There are a myriad of things which I've written endlessly about. I helped write the regulation in Dubai on this for the first time in the world, which got published in a governance magazine. The other benefit of it being a legalized asset is you actually create an economy around it in itself. Because you and I both know if you create an environment where it can flourish, then startups will come and develop and build. So that's why it's such a critical thing, because historically it's just been seen as a byproduct of a transaction. Its role in life is way deeper, by the way, because data actually isn't a transaction. It's somebody's stories and their memories. It's the modern day cave painting, right? And we've forgotten that, which is the point of the book's narrative.
It's interesting. By virtue of the work that we do, if we're trying to codify what is the company genius of an organization, we're deep inside conversations about their IP. And people are increasingly concerned about what's going to happen to their IP as an asset with the rise of AI and large language models and everything else. But actually, for your IP to have real value, itchy nose, you actually have to figure out what is the data of your IP. You can't, I think we're past now, your idea is your IP. What is the data of your IP is actually the game I think we're playing now. So every company almost needs to become a research company as much as they are a service business or whatever the case might be. But it brings up the question about data ownership. Like who owns the data now? And with large language models and some of the CEOs are saying, we don't know where all the data is anymore in the large language models. Take us through some of the thinking around data ownership.
So this is the biggest elephant in the room probably for decades. Even in the US, they've tried to write bills and things around policies and so on. There is a fundamental problem is that no one owns data. You can't, right? Because it's typically generated between two parties or three parties or even four people. Like I'll use your bank as an example. You can't generate banking transactions without the bank's card that they give you.
Yeah.
And they can't get your transactions without you using the card. So unfortunately, you're stuck together, right? Yeah. You could argue the only data that you own probably is information related to your identity, which is dubious in itself. There's arguments and whatever with that. What you do own, though, is the insight generated from your data. That you do own. And then you need to find a way, which is, again, part of the work in the early days, was how do you then share that information and be equally rewarded as such, which is where license agreements come in, which is basically smart contracts in the blockchain world. So you would create a digital agreement between two parties. Because really, what do you want with your data with your bank? I want access to it so I can use it and then integrate it with data that I may have to generate insight for myself or for others. And we may come up with an agreement between me and the bank that says, look, if I generate insight from the data we've generated, I will give you X%. And then I will license that data to others under terms and agreements and various other elements, which, by the way, this model solves intellectual property and IP. So we have to rethink. And the other interesting conundrum, which I don't think the world has thought about, is who owns your prompts? Because in an AI world, where's the value in AI? Is it the model that OpenAI gives it? Or is it your intellectual property and your ideas that actually generate the outputs from the model? I would argue that is the IP, not the model, because models will become utilities in years come by. Trust me, in 18 months' time, you will see marketplaces where people will be selling AI agents. But the real intellectual property is how good your prompts are and how you would license those to other people to use, and the data that you're generating from the ideas and intelligence that you're creating.
Yeah. So this is leaning right into the data monetization question and the mechanics of that that
Yeah,
monetization. And you've hinted at use of the blockchain, for example, to as a monetization distribution system for data and insights and things like that. How do you think? What is that world going to look like when if we jump forward
yeah,
however
yeah,
many years, and this is now normal? People
yeah,
know that their insight is their data, that they should be able to
yeah.
monetize that. An individual speaking to a bank knows that their data, the insights they have from what their ability to create the prompts that actually make full use of the data sets and the models. What does that world look like where people are much more aware of how to monetize their data? What are the mechanics of that?
So the word for this economy is an intelligence economy,
Right.
because actually what you are sharing is units of intelligence
Mm.
for yourself and for other people. So a good example I use in the book um, is sharing health information. So you and I could effectively be solving diabetes in two different ways. I'm doing it through natural methods, through nutrition and lifestyle. You may be doing it through I don't know, medication through your doctor or whatever. So two of us, whichever way we want to flip it, are doing it different ways. We could share our insights with each other. And then who's to say our AIs don't find the missing link in our data sets? And then we actually share those results to the ecosystem and we make money on it. But also, and ultimately, a pharmaceutical company takes that and then sells everybody an algorithm that they can put onto their phones, right?
Yeah.
So it's much like futurism and make believe. But the point is, if you want to create an open data ecosystem, which is what people are trying to create, you have to create the foundations and the principles, which is basically trust, to create a model that people will actively be comfortable to share their data with others. Given the fact that we've been living through a model of centralization, data theft, and data concerns, the first hurdle we have to cross is the biggest currency of them all, which is trust. If we can prove and demonstrate there is a trustworthy mechanism for sharing data effectively and securely,
Mm.
that people can all participate, because inclusion is a big part of this, we could unlock intelligence that we haven't imagined because we created an ecosystem where data can be shared freely and securely and fairly, which doesn't exist today. There's
Yeah.
too much asymmetry and too much ownership on either side. And the danger is we're trying to solve that problem with the same thinking that created it. We're going after big tech and saying, hey, we want the money for the data that we use. That's not the answer. Because at the end of the day, we also want to make them more successful, because the more data they have about me, like Amazon knows nothing about my Apple life and it knows nothing about all my other lives because we've allowed
Yeah.
data to be siloed. But if data was never siloed, Apple could be 4 times bigger than they are, because probably people would go with Apple because they trust them. So this
Yeah.
is not about silos anymore. This is about how do we create an environment where data can flourish and move around securely, be valued and priced. So one, we know where the data came from in the first place, particularly with AI, and it wasn't taken unfairly. As a system, people are also protected from deep fakes, and they also know what's real and what's not through various mechanisms that can be created. All of a sudden, we have an ecosystem where everything can flourish and we actually have access to the data that we need.
One of the things I hear myself saying over and over again, in almost every conversation is that trust has been the currency of the transaction forever. But we also live in a believability crisis today. I'm a mad keen dog lover, and I get the YouTube videos of the dogs stopping the 18-month-old baby from falling off the balcony and ushers it back inside, and the parents go, "Oh my goodness!" And I'm going, "What a great dog!" And then someone in the chat says, "It's AI, you fool," and I go, "Well, okay, I can't believe anything anymore."
Yeah,
But
yeah.
you've nudged a hint at partly what is the answer to that, which is actually the ecosystem itself, which
And how it's
equips
governed and how
people.
it's governed, right? Because you have to think, excuse me, you have to think about, again, second, third order effects of things, right?
Mm,
So if I create a system that can generate images, somebody somewhere along the line I would have hoped would have thought about, well, what's the consequences of a system that can do this? Well, the first thing you think about is fake imagery, right?
yeah,
Second thing, you think about the internet itself becoming flooded with it. And now you've got a YouTube, which is 90, half of it is probably fake now. So what does that
yeah,
mean for content creation? So there's all these ripple effects with the decisions that we make. And you're absolutely right. The other problem today as well, I just want to go back to what you said about businesses and with the founder and everything else.
Yes.
I think there's also a danger in the market right now is we're not actually looking at the geniuses of those companies anymore. We're actually believing a narrative. So if
Yeah.
you look at markets, they're telling the world that these companies are going to fail really badly because AI is going to disrupt their industry. Whereas a lot of the companies that they're describing have an inbuilt genius where they've been building AI for like 10 years and they have all the money and the investments, but the market is making a decision not based on fundamentals, which is the genius of that company, the way
Yeah.
that you would analyze a company. They're building their decisions based on a market narrative and a feature release.
Yes.
So we now have to find the balance between, and it's maybe those companies with a genius are also failing one of the other fundamentals, which is not communicating enough, not
Correct.
communicating that genius to the outside world. So then the market goes, well, actually, that's not true because I know this company does X, Y, Z and they're really good at it. I don't
Yeah.
know. It may be, it'd be interesting to get your perspective because
Well,
I don't know if that narrative believability is also down to a lack of communication and shouting from the rooftops of our genius,
yeah.
really.
Look, if you think of company genius as the prompt,
Mm,
it's the company prompt, it's the company ability to prompt the AI it's investing in and using. If you ignore that company genius, you're ignoring the prompt, which is the insight they bring to the AI in the first place, right? And so
yeah.
the two most important systems through my lens in any
Mm,
business are the system for thinking and the system for influence. So
mm,
a company's only as good as the quality of thinking that exists
yeah.
inside the company to address what it to address the impact it's meant to have in the world, and then the ability to get everyone to make choices to fall in your favor. So investors to invest, banks to fund you, employees to work hard, customers to buy from you, regulators to let you operate. And so the two most important systems in a almost a human context are the system for elevated thinking and accelerated influence. And we don't have a codification mechanism for that. We use words only, which are limited by vocabulary, and they're limited by the vocabulary of the least linguistically gifted,
Mm,
not the most linguistically gifted. So words only are limited by the least informed person in the conversation, um, which is why we build models, right? Because we actually want people to be able to see the genius and go, that company's got extraordinary ability to prompt this AI. If they put great AI
mm,
technology around this, that's super valuable. So, and all of the companies we work with have a great difficulty communicating their intuitive genius because it's intuitive. It happens like this, and so they're not even seeing the
yeah, and
gap that everybody
it's
else
interesting. So
has.
this is where the AI is exposing this as well.
Yes.
Product is a perfect example. So if we think about the biggest argument with product in the past, particularly in the financial services sector, is that the product information on a web page almost looks like they dumped the product catalog on in front of the
Yeah.
customer,
Yeah.
and no one has a clue what it says and what it's for, but there are products, buy one. And it's a disease that's spread across multiple industries, and you hear customers complain all the time. Now, companies got around that by SEO, top of
Yeah.
search, doing the whole Google thing. Now the question is, how do you appear top of prompt?
Yeah.
Because most people now of a certain age don't actually use Google anymore to find the products and services they want. They're
No.
using whatever AI they choose to use. The AI comes back then, depending on how good the prompt was that asked the question, they'll get given a number of choices and some websites to look at. Now, how you influence people about your product is only going to be as good as you can explain it, because
Yep.
now your customer is not a human. Your customer is a machine. And this is the big shift that people need to understand in business is the customer is no longer human. The customer, the human, is just the objective setter. The customer now is a machine. The decision maker is the machine. The transactor is the machine. And the
Mm-hmm.
only human involvement is receiving the outcome.
Yeah.
So how do you now, these are some of the questions leaders need to think about, is how do you now start describing your business and your services, products, business model, what you stand for, all of these things, like everything has to be so simple and easily understood by a machine. If it's not, it's going to bypass you as if you were a shop on the street and I didn't like your price or I didn't understand you, so I'm going to move on. And
Yeah.
that's what biggest impacts for business today around positively, I think, for the consumer, but a lot to think about in terms of leaders, in terms of how they position themselves for influence. And the influence in this case is how do I influence a machine now rather than the other categories of influence we had to deal with before?
Yeah. And how do I influence a machine that's fundamentally lazy because they use
Yeah,
so much energy, right? So
correct. And
the
it's
machine's
logical,
trying
it's
to,
not emotional. It has no
yes,
emotions, no emotional attachment to you as a business. It's
yeah,
only reading what it sees, it's just doing it on a logical, cold perspective. And as you say, it's lazy in the sense of it's only going to work as good as the prompt that you gave it to go and find something.
yeah, fascinating. And so, that is a different world. That is a new world. And, there are so many businesses and business leaders, particularly founder-led businesses, that are a long way away from being equipped to actually sell and transact in those markets. But it's coming at us at a great, at an unbelievable rate of knots. And the question there is, how do you create value in that market? Because the starting point of creating value is having someone become the recipient of what you do, and they have to
Mm.
make that decision before they get the value, right? And so
Yeah.
now a machine is making that choice for them. So people have to figure out, how do you create value for the machines to perceive it?
Yeah,
For
also you touch on something interesting as well when you talk about founders and startups. So I help quite a lot of startups and founders um, on the product side, and there's something creeping in all the pitches that I see, or all the investor decks, or all the sales decks. It's all tech led.
Yeah.
So you read the deck, and there's no buyer's language in any of the definitions in the sales deck. It's
Mm.
all we're Web3, we're AI, it's every technology buzzword you can imagine. Because in most cases, the founders are engineers or technical. So they don't have the buyer's language that says, well, who on earth are you selling this to? Secondly, why should they buy it, which is the
Mm.
value? What are they getting in return? Oh, and by the way, there's some technology underneath this, right?
Mm.
So the more it's almost like a myth, right? The more we bang on about these technologies, the more we forget fundamentals about how people exchange value and what matters to them.
Yeah.
Because leave the machine out of the equation. If your products were simple to understand anyway, you wouldn't be in a problem. The reason we're having this debate over the machine is because, well, for the first time, the machine is going to expose something that probably every consultant has told you for 20 years and you haven't listened. Now the machine has come along and go, well, by the way, I agree with that guy, and it's too bad because I'm going to make this decision. It's, these are fundamental things that we've ignored through time. And I'm just concerned that on the pitch side, we've become too wedded to talk about these technologies, not to because they're of value, it's just to be seen to be that we're using them
Yeah.
rather than positioning real value to the buyer and what it's in it for them.
Well, everything that a company does, and we're certainly seeing people use modern technology in incredible ways. People are pumping their blood works into chat
Hmm.
to tell me what's wrong with me.
Yeah.
We had to make we wanted to make a marinade for some chicken last week, and so Isabel, my youngest daughter, went to chat and said, "This is what we've got in the pantry. Make us a marinade," and it was fantastic. It was
Yeah.
basically what we have in the pantry. Financial advisors have to accept the fact that a person could go into chat and say, I've got X millions of dollars in investable assets, I'm this age, blah, 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 create a financial plan for me, and it will, and it'll probably be pretty reasonable. So
Hmm.
all of that sort of stuff is true. But the fundamental, and I want to talk about decision making with you in a minute, because we're both talking about at fundamental levels, right? At the fundamental level, no matter how much modern technology is used, the impact is always at a human level. So humans are an interesting species. Um, do we really care about climate change, right? Or do we only care about climate change and the future if it has us in it? So humans tend to care about the future only if it has them in it, right? So are we really concerned about the planet? Because the planet will probably do just fine. It's billions of years old. It's gone through the ice age. The whole planet's burnt. It's had meteorite shock and extinctions of dinosaurs. It's had 5 mass extinction events and it's regenerated itself. So the planet actually is kind of pretty good at looking after itself. And so do we care, or do we just care in as much as it's a future that has us in it, right? So business impact only really matters in terms of where it impacts humans, because all business is about something for a human, right? And so the idea of selling and then people buying still has to be able to be communicated at the level at which it impacts a human, not at the level at which cool modern tech can get this done in a better way. And so there's a whole translation that people have to wrap their heads around, because technology is now dropped into the middle of a human to human dialogue.
And it's exposing two things, right? Like in the book, I don't call it artificial intelligence. I renamed it to be collaborative intelligence. Because actually it's the best of the human and the best of the machine. And part of the problem is AI now is exposing our educational gaps.
Yeah.
For the first time since the industrial age. And quite frankly, it's a problem that should have been addressed decades ago. Look, we teach our children to think in a linear way. We get them to memorize facts to pass a test. We don't teach them critical thinking, the ability to debate, the ability to reason, the ability to have judgment, the ability to unlearn, the ability to manage change, as mad as that sounds. Like the ability, because change is massive. We only experience change as adults, really. We don't necessarily have the emotional conditions to manage that change. A relationship failure, a loss of a job, all of these things are not taught at a young age to deal with those things. So and you could argue, well, why do leadership decisions made? Well, they all went to school too. And they may not have the critical thinking skills either, unless they went and did an MBA or something which taught them a one-sided view of that. So part of the book's concept then is also moving to an abilities-based learning model, because there are also other fundamental skills that we don't have as people. One of those is data literacy, as an example. So for us to move forward, there's 3 things we need to do. There's abilities we need to strengthen because we have them and we're good at them at an individual level. One of those could be, the ability to make decisions, judgment, or whatever. We may be lucky that we have that, right? We may have to regain things that we've lost because of technology. And the third bucket is we just need to learn things from scratch because we don't have them. AI literacy, one, data literacy would be the other. And the other thing is it's not just for employees, it's for customers as well. Because at the end of the day, you need those things as well. And I think there are 2 fundamental things that are happening in the world, and there's a reason for it. One is it's that lack of abilities-based learning, the fact that people can't adapt. They don't have the abilities they need to be multimodal, which means multilateral thinkers, the ability to adapt regardless of what technology comes around the corner. That's the first gap. I think the second gap is the way we measure things is off. So if you talk about decision making in a business, quite frankly, that's all at a senior level, that's linked to tenure. That's not linked to the right decision. If you think of the model CEO, that's a 3-year tenure, right? CIO is probably about the same. No leader that I've ever met, minus maybe 2, will make a decision and the result will outlive their tenure. So they will come in typically and say, we're going to do all of these great things. And then the second year, then they take the things that they know they'll deliver within their time frame and they move on. They don't do the transformational change that, to your point, succeeds the previous leader because it's hard and they can't take the credit for it unless they're in a golden handcuffs deal. So I think the way that we learn, the way that we evolve our people in a workforce, and the way we define measurement, like I define measurement as impact. Like what impact did you make to your customers and the business, positively or negatively? That's a measurement. Not did I hit a KPI or did I do X, Y, Z? So I think, again, these are all the things that AI is exposing as a catalyst. But I think we have to, and we've got a choice. We either accept and say, okay, that's the way it is, or we actually go, no, this is positive. We should actually look at the way we adapt our workforce, because the real innovation in the years to come will be the human, not the technology, and the innovation that people can bring and their abilities to use these technologies, not just AI. And that's where we've been stuck. We're now all focused on this piece of technology, but we're forgetting what's going to come in 3 years' time, 10 years' time. We have to think very differently.
Yeah, it's super interesting. I'm thinking about children versus adults as you're talking about this. Children are adventurous, right? Notwithstanding that they're safe and things like that. I'm not talking about children that are in poverty and things like that, but they're adventurous. They have a principle to want to play, and then we sort of lose that at some point. And as an adult, you need to become adaptable. Have adaptability, adapt-ability, and we're not equipping people for that.
No.
And so, decision making. I'd love to build a model around meta decision making with you, because I think you're right. I think, the notion that a new CEO would be asked to produce their 100-day plan, which basically says, well, I have to discover something that is broken from the previous leadership to make a case that I can fix it in 100 days, or actually 90 days, a quarter. The 100-day plan is 5 days to, start at 5 days to kind of report it. And in 90 days, I've got to fix something about this company that was not satisfactory from the previous leadership. What does a new CEO create for a 100-day plan if the company they're taking over is fantastic? 100 days is more of the same, so like even
what happens then at the end of 100 days is typically no one listens to you anymore.
Well,
because now you become part of the fabric. So after 100 days, you're now part of the fabric. So unless you can create something meaningful in 100 days that people will back, your voice will then last longer than 100 days.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you just get stuck in the fabric. And then all you'll be is either the lights keeps running CEO,
yep,
or you'll be something that keeps the regulator happy and your customers, but you won't be able to do anything innovative after the 100 days because you didn't set your stall out.
So it begs the question, what's the purpose of the 100-day time frame? Right, but it's a modern management concept.
Yep.
I'd love to work with you to build a visual model around meta decision making. If you'd be happy to play along with us in terms of things have been emerging for me whilst you've been talking, and I hear conversations in models. And if we were building a meta model for decision making. And I absolutely agree with you. I don't think decision making is a skill that's been codified anywhere near enough. Our education system hasn't taught young people to make great decisions. It's taught them linear thinking, as you say, and retention and regurgitation, as opposed to here's what's going on. But if I was going to challenge you to think about what are the three big components for great meta decision making, where does your mind first go to in terms of the first component?
The first component is the choice in front of you, right? Because you're either going to have a problem or an opportunity.
Okay.
Because that's your first input into this.
Yep. Can I call choice context? In other words,
sure,
it's a choice you've got to make, but you're actually making a decision in the context of a problem or an opportunity. Would that be okay?
Yeah, that's actually fine.
And then
so you have to understand that the next level down then is the elements related to that context. So in essence, if I'm an opportunity problem, what does it relate to? Is it a cost reduction? Is it a increase in revenue? Is it satisfying the regulator? Is it
okay. Yeah, okay. So it's almost what's the key, what conceptually, what is this?
Yeah, effectively, what is the lever we're pulling with this opportunity and problem, right? Because you have a context, and then related to the context is the concept related to it. So my opportunity area, you could even argue, is the subject, right? Because what I don't want people to do is jump to. I use this term quite a lot. Is you don't build solutions looking for problems, because then you're in a whole world of pain. Because if you say I'm going to implement AI with no problems for it to address, then you're scouting around the business looking for problems to justify your investment, which is not a good place to be. If you know that I have a problem and I need to reduce my cost. So there's your kind of two areas of concern. Um, Now you can go in two different directions here. The base of your pyramid can either be the perceived solution of that, or I kind of like to think, what's the impact of that?
Okay.
So, because
Well,
I don't think as leaders we think about impact enough.
so I
Consequence.
love, it would make my model really neat if it was three C's: context,
Yeah.
concept, and consequence.
So I use the term a lot. I use this term a lot, and it's kind of what I try to bring people is clarity before consequences, because I think every decision requires clarity, and it's kind of become a strapline for me. But I think you have to have clarity before consequences, because if you go in to any decision without any clarity, you will have consequences, and they can be short-lived or they can be very hard to unwind. And those consequences then can be multifaceted. They can be brand, they can be, your regulatory, they can cover so many different facets of a
So,
consequence.
so you spoke before, you used interesting language, second order and third order. Are
Yeah.
they, would the base be second order and third order thinking, or would they both be one side of the base and the other side would be something different?
Yeah, so I think you've got the almost like they're almost like sub levels of your meta model.
Yeah.
So your consequence is the impact, which is
Okay.
the near term impact, and then next level down from that then is the second and third order of that impact.
Yeah.
Because your impact in the near term might seem to be fine.
Yeah.
Um, so I wonder if we can fit this in somehow.
And you can
So
change anything on there you want.
many moons ago, I came up with a concept called outcome-driven design when I was about
Yep.
2014, where an outcome is something you're able to do as a consequence of an action. It's not a benefit. The benefit is a result of the outcome, right?
Right.
So, for example, if I bought an iPad or an iPod in the time back in the day, the outcome for me was I'd be able to carry 1,000 songs in my pocket. That's an outcome.
Mm.
The benefit for me is I minimize the amount of books I have to carry around with me for real. So benefit is always something you minimize or you maximize. An outcome is something I'm able to do as a consequence. So in a way, if we're saying this is the opportunity, this is the this is the value I want to achieve, what is the outcome and the impact that I achieve?
Yeah. So I wonder if, the base is outcome and
Yes,
underneath that is second and third order
yes.
consequences, but then also given those outcomes, what's the
What
real
impact do I?
impact
Yes,
that flows from that? And if you're really, really clear about context and you're tuned into consequence, that will give you clarity.
correct.
And it allows
Because in
that clarity to flow.
the model I have, I can go either, I'm the model I created, Christ, 10, 15
Yeah.
years ago. I can go two directionally. So the whole point is I work backwards from the outcome. So basically, I
Interesting.
work from value. So if I want to reduce value, the benefits of reducing value is X, because this is how CEOs think, right? Most business people think the other direction, which is, well, what's the project? What's the capabilities I need to
Yeah.
change? And eventually then they'll get to the outcome, right? Where actually the outcome is what binds either side. From a leader point of view, I want to say, right, I've got this lever to pull. I need to reduce my costs, right? If I reduce my costs, I'm going to get all these benefits. What's the outcome I get? Okay, fine. What's the parts of the business that now need to change? But actually, when you
Interesting.
look at it at a much more meta level, you end up in this place, because
Yeah.
this is the everyday mind of a leader. Every day, somebody's bringing an opportunity and a problem to the table, right?
Yeah.
We should be doing X. Okay, fine. So then the first thing the leader's going to say is why, which is the
Yeah.
value concept and the lever. Oh, well, because we reduce all this cost and we'll save all this money. Okay, fine. So if I save all this money and we do this thing, what do I get for it? Which is the outcome. What do we,
Yeah.
okay, we'll be able to do this. All right, cool. Um, well, that's great. But what's the impact of that if we do it?
Interesting.
Right. So
If you,
now you've created a mental model of thinking,
yeah.
because like perfect examples are littered around the world, right? As of this morning, the UK government announced that because they have to pay back national debt. So the only way people know how these days is increasing tax. So they increase tax, but then at the same time, they want to reward the people on minimum wage. So they increase the minimum wage that businesses have to pay. As a consequence, youth unemployment is the lowest it's ever been in history because no one can afford to hire people on that wage level. And because of the tax implications on them, they can't afford it. So there's a perfect example of not understanding the impact of a narrow decision.
Yeah.
Without understanding the second and third order effect. It's littered all over the world of examples of people who are making narrow decisions without connecting the dots of that domino effect, of that impact, the second order, the third order, and beyond. And I think this is one of the biggest failures in leadership decision making, is we're too narrow on that decision and we don't connect the dots downstream of what that really means. Also, to whom? Who is the impact? Is it to the regulator? Are we going to get in trouble with the regulator by doing this eventually? Is it going to alienate our customers? Is it going to effectively impact society from a our community as a government? Is it going to impact our brand? Like, would people expect us to do this? And is that a problem? Like, for example, if you're a brand that is solely known for X and you suddenly decided to sell Y, would people be very confused? Amazon got away with this in the very beginning, if you remember, because Jeff Bezos stood up on stage in the very beginning and said, "We're not in the book business." That was the green light to be able to sell anything you want.
Yeah.
But if you don't do that and you're tied to a specific narrative, it becomes very difficult to change that direction. And that's an impact.
Yeah.
So that kind of works nicely as a model because it gives you the mental clarity, or at least a starting point to say, do I have clarity around the choice I'm about to make?
Yeah, it's if I if I fill in these other two corners that are formed by context and concept, and then concept and consequence,
Yes.
I might walk through the model. If I was explaining this to somebody, the choreography of the model might be, we need better meta decision making from leadership at all levels today. And people think that the problem solving process is actually decision making, but it's not. That's a mechanical, linear, step by step activity. Meta decision making is actually all about the context, which is really, there's an opportunity here or a problem to solve that has some degree of relevance to where we're at right now. So people think they should start with context and the definition of that, but actually a counterintuitive meta decision making step in the model is to go to consequence first and say, what are the outcomes we need to deliver to produce the impact that we actually want to have? And then we need to bring the consequence and the context together to have clarity. So we need clarity before consequence to inform context, the opportunity and the problem. And it will give you a different conversation around context. We also need to make sure that we understand outcome at the second and third order, both expected and unexpected outcome. And so we need deep invested conversation in consequence in both directions. If we did this, that would happen. And if we wanted that to happen, we should do this, to really understand context. That then takes us around to the third side of the triangle, which is concept. Concept really is, what are we doing now?
It's the value lever. For me, it's the value lever. For me, it's the lever to pull. Am I expected to get from effectively?
So you said that when we were building the model, it's a lever. What are the levers we're pulling? And what is the nature of those levers? Is this a cost reduction lever? Is it a strategic positioning lever? Is it a branding lever? Is it a people lever? So what's the nature of the lever? And what is the actual lever we're pulling? And it's interesting, if we're clear about the context, informed by consequence, and we think about the concepts in play, what we actually have is contrast, which is one of the key components of enriched thinking that people sort of ignore. Contrast is, what is this and what is it not? Exactly. And so often the meta decision making does not include what is it not, but you have to eliminate what it's not. Just as
you also have to. This is hard because you also have to remove bias from your decision making.
Correct.
Because something like founder's theory, right? I only know this way and this is the answer.
Yeah.
Because the other piece of this puzzle then is, once you have clarity, it doesn't end there though, because then you also need clarity on how you execute this opportunity and the problem.
Correct. Which I'm saying, if we put concept and consequence together, that gives us the content of execution. Okay, this is what we're going to do now. These are effectively the strategies and the steps and things like that. But
Exactly.
so
And
often,
the biggest failing right now is or at least a failing, is AI is just an example, right? I've been at so many events lately where leaders have asked me, "Oh, should I go all in on AI?" Right?
yeah,
And my answer is always the same. Look, the easiest decision you can make to go all in is the strategic decision to do it. That should be the only thing you should go all in on. How you deploy it and how you distribute your investment in it, please do not go all in. Right? You do it one use case at a time, you de-risk your investment, you build confidence in the business, you communicate to people. So there's two sides of that decision paradigm of
yeah,
execution. There's the strategic clarity of that's what we're going to do 100% versus the incremental rollout of that decision is very different. So I think people are struggling with what does all in mean as well with your decision? Because on one side, it's the strategic intent which you're going all in on, but the actual deployment of that strategic intent should never in a million years be all in. It's like going to the casino and throwing it all in red, right?
yeah.
It shouldn't
Well,
be that way.
well, so many projects start down in this corner.
Correct.
We'll build the project plan, right? And you're basically saying business leaders will say to you, should I go all in on AI to
Yes.
reduce cost of overhead, or should I go all in on AI for agentic
Yeah.
salespeople, etc.? It's like I'm going straight to content. You're
Correct.
saying what you should go all in on is the strategic conversation about how will AI create opportunity and solve problems at a whole of business level. We're saying, but that's not number one. Consequence is
No.
number one, which is this continuum you're talking about.
Yes.
Like,
Exactly.
what's the impact I want it to have? So, what outcomes do I need to deliver for me? I'm going to go back up to the strategic conversation about opportunity and problem and get clarity. Then, when I've
Exactly.
got that, I can start having a conversation about concept. What does that mean? What is this not? What is this? What is it not? I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm only going to address these three business needs, and I'm not addressing anything else. So
Yeah.
now I can start to wrap my head around what's the nature of the problem and the levers I've got to pull, or the nature of the levers and the actual levers, and how do I pull them? Now I can make a plan,
Yeah,
for how I do this.
exactly. And the content piece is actually where all the AI failures are today, because most leaders believe they need
Interesting.
an AI strategy, which they don't,
Super
right? AI
interesting.
strategies were created by consultants.
Yeah.
There's only one strategy in any business, and it's called the business strategy, right? They basically just need to understand in terms of clarity and consequences and concept, where does this opportunity, where does this AI thing fit in terms of our elevating our business strategy? How
Yeah.
does it enable more?
Yeah.
What opportunities and problems does it address in our business strategy? What are the consequences with that? And then what are the concepts we're going to pull in the context of our business strategy?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, oh, now I can build a plan around that. Because a
Yeah.
digital transformation plan is just a transformational engagement, which is ongoing, never ending, but it's evolving the business itself underneath its strategy. Because there is only one strategy. There can't be any, because otherwise you'll have paperwork for every project and every initiative as a strategy. Without understanding these levels, can you understand what elements of my business strategy will be enabled by AI
Yeah.
based on what opportunities and things we've defined in whatever we communicated to our shareholders at the end of last year?
Yeah. It's a, I mean, I love that. There is only one strategy. And I love the model that's emerged. Um, one of the things that we just have to get better at is making decisions at the right level, but also equipping young leaders, emerging founders, uh, youth to be better meta thinkers, if you like.
Yeah, 100%.
And then,
I'll give you an example so I wrote the school's curriculum for AI after the book, and I'll give you an idea of how a lesson could change. So let's use history as an example. I always use this one because it pretty much everybody is relatable. If we think about the world today, if you're 10 years old, you'll get taught history and you'll go home for homework and they say, right, go and, memorize these facts, linear things, go and pass a test on this, right? Which is fine. But if you change the dynamic and you brought some of the abilities we've been describing in there, and we said to the child, right, you know everything about World War II, based on everything you know, go away and write about what you would do differently, given all the facts you now know.
Mm.
So what do we now teach the child? Resourcefulness, the ability to present an argument,
Mm.
the ability to have emotional empathy within that moment, and also provide some form of judgment and critical thinking. So they come back to the class and they present their idea, they present their narrative. We're still testing the same things, grammar, everything else they wrote, but we're now testing another set of ability. And some of that is decision making because they probably would have had to keep some things, drop some things. They'd have to share it with their parents and their family. And all of a sudden, we've unlocked a new set of thinking and ability. Because too often, I think, we're expecting the work environment to fix the problems that school didn't address.
Yeah.
Because unfortunately, when people enter the workforce, there's an expectation of people to be able to do certain things. And if they were never taught it, then that lands squarely on the employer to solve those problems that were never addressed in the education system. And eventually those people will become leaders.
Yeah.
And it's either something they're passionate about and they've nurtured and really understood and really listened to people and really focused on leadership is about serving others and the decisions that you make. But that's not always the case. So what we end up with is effectively what the system created. So that's why, again, I keep coming back to our moment, because this is a moment to basically codify what you and I just did, but not now, at a much younger age,
Yeah.
where the choices and decisions that our children make in their younger years will define what happens later in life because they become learned behaviors.
Well, if you ask them to study, World War One or two, and what would you do differently? By default, you're teaching them to examine second and third order consequences that
Mhm.
the benefit of hindsight allows them to see that people probably didn't predict at the time and things like that. And, you're changing the shape of the way their brain actually works its way through
Correct.
decisions that it needs to make. Michael, this has been fascinating. I'd love to ask a couple of quick response questions just to wrap up,
Mm.
if you're okay with that.
Sure.
I often ask people about, what they learned from their failures or setbacks, but I think it's more appropriate given the conversation we just had. And thank you for helping me build a model for meta decision making. I hope people watching the episode can look at that and go, that's actually an interesting model to start to build into how we make our decisions. But
Mm.
rather than, what have you learned from failures or setbacks, we probably should say, what have you learned from an unexpected consequence over the course of your business career, deploying projects and banking products, or any of the work that you've done. What unexpected consequence occurred that really taught you something?
It's a really good question. Yeah, I think this is an interesting one. So I used to work for an auto finance company, and we deployed like a full back office, front office system, and accounting system, and everything else in between. And I made an assumption which was incorrect. It wasn't necessarily a failure, but it was an assumption about human behavior. So when we came to test the system, we found afterwards that people were still doing manual work in the
Mm,
old system. And I hadn't factored in that when we were doing the testing and everything, we should have understood what they do outside of the system as well as inside of it.
yeah,
Because I think we fail to understand human behavior with technology and how
yeah,
comfortable people are with the manual work and the things they do. And given my time again, I think I'd have looked more systemically and looked at what they did and what could be put into the system over and above what we were doing,
yeah,
because then we would make their lives easier. But in the end, it made it doubly hard because we
yeah,
ended up having a system that did two things and some work on the side. So I think that's an example of understanding the bigger picture again, rather than the narrow task that you were asked to do. It's again those second order effects, or more importantly, I think I would ask myself what I do now now I do this subconsciously every day. It's not what I see. I ask myself constantly, what am I not seeing?
yeah. That's that contrast thing, right? What is this? What
Yeah.
is it not? Being able to
Yeah.
ask that last question, which is also a big question. You're a thinker. That's your business. You're an observer. You're an insight creator. What do you think is the biggest conversation going on in the world right now that people should be taking notice of?
I think, my God, there's so many big conversations.
Aren't there?
I think honestly, 2026 has been, and it came from Davos. I saw it for the first time, actually, not in person, but the narrative. The big debate now is the role of humanity alongside AI. I
Yeah,
think that's the biggest debate of 2026. I think we're going to start to hear more in 26 about human-centric AI rather than machine-driven AI. I think it's reaching a point, because there are so many tentacles it touches.
yeah,
That human question, I think, is the big one, the big discussion
yeah.
that's happening.
And
And I think part of it will be about regulation, part of it will be about industry, part of it will be about jobs. I don't think
yeah,
that's going to go away. I think it's just going to rise and rise through 2026 until we reach a moment. It'll either be something will happen negatively, or I think it will just be a nation's choice, which the others will follow, or it will create
yeah.
additional noise.
I mean, I think that is the conversation of the day,
Yeah,
is the integration of humans and AI in a way that actually works and actually has to serve humankind. Because
yeah,
all impact, at least in the context of what we do, is about humans. We care about the future so long as it has us in it, basically.
yeah, exactly.
Um, Michael, I want to thank you for the time you've given us today and just the wisdom that you shared. I mean, these are big topics, but they have a very direct impact at a business level. And people really need to be thinking at this level of thinking as they make decisions that impact entire workforces, entire communities, and things like that. So I so appreciate the time you've given us and your willingness to share your thinking with us. Our moment is the book.
It is.
People, if that's the biggest conversation going on right now, then people should be reading, that sort of material. And your next book, will be coming out, so people should watch that space and more about what is the next economy. So thank you so much for giving us this time and your wisdom today. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you so much. It was fun.